to Pastor KWalker and Reverend JALexander. And Ms. Alexander, before we had our, I think, second commercial break, before we had our second commercial break, we were talking about some of the statistical information in reference to incarceration in the state of Tennessee. And I think that you were giving us quite a bit of information. And what I'd like to do is to follow that up, because I think it's the kind of information that we need in order to deal with some of the issues that we have dealing with reform. And then after you speak to that for a couple of minutes, and then Pastor Walker will be able to join us again, and then we'll be able to wrap this show up for the morning. Let's do it from that perspective.
Okay, great, thank you. I think what we were talking about had to do with health care, you know. And in the state of Tennessee, it doesn't matter if you're in a private prison or a state prison, all of the health care is privatized, you know, and that's handled by both Corizon and Centurion in this state. And one of the things that I saw so often, and I know that Pastor Walker and others have seen, is the poor health care and the conditions of health care inside the prisons. You know, Pastor Walker talked about 3 meals in a cot before, and then you hear people say, oh, well, they get free health care. Trust me, it is not the health care you want. And so that's the other area that we're looking at as well, is health care in the prisons. Again, you look at that legislatively, you look at it through litigation, you organize, and you educate. And that's our mantra, because you have to, it's a multi-level system if you want to be effective. And then the third area that we're looking at as well is parole in this state. You know, the issue of parole, I think, is an issue of accountability. And after having been to so many parole board hearings, and speaking not just with individuals who are going up for parole, but with victims as well. You know, you begin, and that's where it really, really sunk in, and I began to understand how detrimental our system of retributive justice is. If you are concerned about victims, then a retribution system is not a system that's going to heal anyone. There are other systems, there are other possibilities out there, looking at areas of restorative justice, where you look to heal communities, where you look to actually heal victims, where you understand that vengeance will not heal a community, it will not heal a victim, and it is certainly not going to make people whole and restore, exactly. So we have communities now where fathers are missing, sons are missing, where whole segments of the communities are gone because they're locked away when their families have need of the economics of their presence and the love and the affection. And our communities are disintegrating and they're being torn apart by carceral slavery. You know, and so that is the other area that we look at as well. And accountability also goes to an issue of transparency. So I would expect, Dr. Haney, that like me, you want your government to be accountable, and you also seek transparency. You know, if we have an agency of government that is responsible for 28,000 lives, that has control over 28,000 bodies, I want some transparency and some accountability. And in a lot of states, you have an oversight committee, you know, for Department of Corrections. You know, we used to have one in the state of Tennessee. We had an oversight committee. I've spoken with state reps who were on that committee, but since about 2011, 2010, there have been no appointments to that committee. Okay? And that's another thing that I would hope your viewers think about when they think about accountability in government. We have a Department of Corrections that operates without oversight.
And doing whatsoever they please.
And doing whatsoever they please. So who is watching the watchers, you know? And that should cause your viewers great concern because, as the commissioners pointed out so many times, they're running $1 billion a year business. Where is that $1 billion a year going? You know, if you don't care about human rights, you know, and I wish, you know, I hope your viewers do, but then I hope if they don't care about that, perhaps they care about economics. You know, and let's start looking at the economics.
It's a very, very expensive system the way it's operating now, and the results that you're getting out of the money that you're spending it doesn't seem to be worth it.
I mean, that's exactly right, right? So if you were buying additional safety, then maybe it would be worth it. But the interesting thing is, when you look at the statistics, considering rates of recidivism, you know, the likelihood that someone will go back, let's think about those 51-year life sentences. Do you know who the Tennessee Department of Corrections indicates themselves having the lowest rates of recidivism? Your individuals who are charged with first-degree murder. It is a particular kind of crime, which is why in the past it has been safe to allow people to come up for parole after 25 years, to consider that. You know that those are the folks who are going to go back and typically do pretty well in society. But with a 51-year sentence, that's not possible. And so then consider the economics. the state legislature, when they were debating it, thought it would cost an additional $50 million, these 51-year life sentences. Right now, we've been able to chart the individuals who have those sentences. The state said that they were using a figure of about 40 years to calculate. The calculation is actually at $2.4 billion. Now, you haven't just bought $2.4 billion worth of safety, so who's profiting? Who's profiting is private prison industries and the industries within the prisons.
Prisoners received very little of that $4.whatever billion of dollars.
Oh, they don't receive any of that. I know.
That's what I mean.
That's right, exactly. I mean, and they're certainly not going to rehabilitation. I mean, why do you care about rehabilitating someone that you've consigned to, well, that you've decided to warehouse for the rest of their lives?
And so, Pastor Walker, what do you think about some of the things that we're talking about here in reference to incarceration, reform, and et cetera?
Well, I mean, when you talk about inside the institution, you talk about the health care. You know, I personally know of a gentleman that spent 22 years incarcerated in the prison system, and while there had a problem with his leg. They operated on his leg, and they messed it up, put a rod in his leg, and it went bad. And he walked around for a long time incarcerated with his leg just straight. He's stiff, couldn't bend it at the knee or anything, just straight. And it wasn't corrected until he was finally paroled out, and then, you know, he got on the outside, and then he got some real medical attention and got it corrected. Now, that same thing could have happened within the system if that so-called quality health care that people think is in there would be actually in there, and it's not there.
Now, what keeps it from being there? I mean, the money is there, and are we talking about administration or what? I mean, why is it that the people of Tennessee have to spend so much money to get such little results?
The bottom line is profit. You don't spend money, you don't spend your profit if you don't have to. So the less money spent, you know, to service an inmate's needs is a win-win situation for the privatized prison system, you know. And then when you have a guarantee, when you have the state guaranteeing CCA in these private prison systems, 90% occupancy, I mean, how do you guarantee 90% occupancy unless you're saying we're guaranteeing you that we're going to create some systems out here that's designed to trap people into crime that can funnel them into the system? We talk about the school to prison.
That's what I was thinking.
And that thing.
That's the kind of thing you're talking about when you talk about from school to prison and some of the attitudes that they have.
That and also when you look at the drug dealing and the drugs in communities and stuff like that, you know, and where the high concentration of drugs and gun violence and all that stuff exists. Yeah, I mean, it's all by design, you know.
Yeah, and I would say too, and if you don't think it's by design, I would offer this illustration. The past 30 years, both the United States and Europe have seen a decrease in crime. During those 30 years, Europe started to invest in restorative justice. They began to decarcerate, lower their levels of individuals who were incarcerated, shorten their sentence lengths, and now what we see is that they have half the rates of recidivism, and depending on the country that you look at. During that time period, when we have a drop in crime in 30 years, what does the United States do? It increases its prison population by 600%. It builds more prisons. It privatizes prisons until we have a prison nation at this point in time. And our rates of recidivism are double that.
Very good. And of course, we've got about a minute. And so I think the two of you are saying that something can be done in reference to some of the issues that we see in dealing with incarceration and reform. Yes. But we have to have people who are willing to give an effort. That is, administrators and custodians and people who have the responsibility for that, legislators as well. And the next time we talk about this, I want to talk to you, Reverend Alexander, about what your group is doing in reference to the death penalty issue, because I would imagine that that's an important issue with your group as well as some of the things that we've talked about. But more than anything, I think that the information that the two of you have given us this morning has really given us a different understanding of some of the issues and how we might be able to deal with it. And I think that one of the most important things is that it says again that folks who don't like this ought to get out and vote. You see, and that kind of activity, because I think and let me thank the two of you for coming by and giving us this excellent information. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.